criminal court for his crimes against humanity and to urge the Philippine government to return to the ICC and cooperate fully throughout the entire process. From 2016 to 2022, Duterte waged a so-called war on drugs that was, in truth, a war against the poor. Over 30,000 lives were lost, fathers, mothers, children, breadwinners, all taken away in a campaign of terror. Their families continue to breathe, seeking justice in a country where impunity reigns. But impunity cannot be permanent, and justice and truth will always prevail. Duterte thought he could escape accountability by withdrawing the Philippines from the ICC in 2019. But what we are here to say, no one is above the law. No amount of political maneuvering can erase the blood of Duterte's hands. The ICC investigation must push forward. Duterte and his cohorts must be brought to justice, and the Philippine government must fulfill its obligation to its people by returning to the ICC and upholding the principles of human rights and international justice. Vandaag staan wij samen om gerechtigheid te eisen voor de slachtoffers van de oorlog tegen drugs onder Duterte. Dit is geen vergeten hoofdstuk, maar een open wonder. Het internationaal strafhof is de sleutel tot gerechtigheid. Duterte en zijn medeplichtigen moeten verantwoording afleggen. Geen gerechtigheid, geen vrede. We are honored to have with us today a distinguished panel of legal experts and advocates who have tirelessly fought for the victims and their families. Attorney Cristina Conti from the National Union of People's Lawyers, who serves as legal counsel for the victims of Duterte's so-called drug war. Attorney Gilbert Andres from Center Law Philippines, also a legal counsel for the victims and a human rights lawyer. Attorney Benji Aquino from Redress, an international legal NGO that focuses on accountability for international crimes. And Lian Jimenez, coordinator of Buy in Europe, who will provide us with updates on the movement's plans to sustain the fight for justice in the coming months. Without further ado, I'll pass the floor to our first speaker, Attorney Chrissy Conti.
Good afternoon, or good morning, rather, or good afternoon today, wherever you are in the world. I represent a group of victims in the Philippines, and I've come over from Manila last Friday, at the same time that the International Criminal Court issued an order regarding, this is the most recent development in the case, regarding disclosure processes and participation of victims. Of course, the more important dates for all of us would be March 11th, the arrest of Duterte in Manila, and March 12th, the surrender of Duterte to the International Criminal Court. But of course, for the victims, we've been on this case for more than 8 years, almost 9 years now. On the part of Rise Up for Life and for Rights, we submitted a communication August 2018, which included direct information about the cases of 8 victims. And this submission is only one of 53, as far as we know, communications submitted to the Office of the Prosecutor, which is why the court was compelled and convinced to open an investigation by 2021. And now that we're moving towards trial, and this is clearly in large part due to the arrest of Duterte, because the court does not conduct trial in absentia. We're now moving with trial, and with certainly a big deal of hope for the victims. For the victims, the arrest of Duterte was a pipe dream, and for a long time, they thought it would have been impossible, especially as this year he announced his candidacy for mayor of Davao. I'm sad to hear that he remains on the ballot, but nonetheless, he will stay in detention. He must stay in detention here in The Hague to answer for his cases. So first, the ICC pre-trial chamber clarified in the order last Friday The process as to discovery and disclosure of evidence. The chamber made deadlines or gave deadlines as to the submission of information of evidence that the prosecution has to provide the defense ahead of time. In turn, Duterte is also being asked of a certain information that would be important for the prosecution as well. And that would include, by April 11, 2025, his indication if he would avail of or he would invoke grounds to exclude criminal responsibility, meaning he has to tell the court right now by April 11 if he intends to invoke insanity, incapacity, self-preservation, duress, alibi, and the like. This is in line with the processes of the court, and hopefully these are matters that are settled before the confirmation of charges set on September 23rd, and for I think 3 or 4 days after that. For the victims, of course, um, in for rights and for rights, it's been a long time coming. And for the victims, the order also indicates sort of an indication of how they could progress. Right now, the victims' participation and reparations section is being asked to provide proposals as to mechanisms for application and eventual participation of the victims. Of course, we look forward not only for the participation in the end, no, but as to contributing to how best the victims can participate. And while we understand that victims are not required to be in The Hague at any time during the trial, uh, some of the victims are very much keen on coming over. This would hopefully not only show the world, but certainly the Filipino community here, that EJKs have occurred in the Philippines. It is a terrible thing to deny until today that EJK happened, that EJKs happened, and that EJKs are a hoax, as was raised in the Senate investigation in the Philippines last week. Hopefully, moving forward, the lawyers here and the lawyers in the Philippines will be coming together. The victims and their supporters will also come together to move this case forward in the best way possible, most rational, most sane, and most intelligent way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Conti. I'll pass the mic now to Attorney Gilbert.
Good morning. I'm Attorney Gilbert Andres. I'm the Executive Director of Center Law Philippines and also an ICC listed counsel. Center Law has been representing victims of the war on drugs before domestic as well as international mechanisms since 2016. We have 3 calls. First, we want to call on the Filipino people. Let us not lose sight of this issue of justice for the thousands of victims of the Duterte war on drugs. Secondly, we want also to call our fellow Filipinos to respect as well as to unite in that call for justice, consistent with our Filipino value of pakikipagkapwa-tao. And third, for the victims of the EJKs under Duterte's war on drugs, we will present your views and concerns consistent always with your security concerns. And I think we can all unite as a Filipino people in attaining what we call pakikipagkapwa-tao and that spirit of mabuhay. Mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you, Attorney Andres. Now let's go to Attorney Benji.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benji. Just to give you a situation of my background, I used to work in the Philippines with them. Even before I came here, I documented cases of human rights violations and submitted submitted representations to the VPRS of the ICC on behalf of at least 100 victims. But I've since moved here in The Hague to work with an NGO that deals with specifically international criminal law. The brief that I got today was to talk about human rights and the ICC, and that is a very hard brief because the International Criminal Court is not a human rights court. It's in the name. It's a criminal court. And as I was scrolling through social media, looking at what were the conversations that are happening, I would notice that they would focus on the procedure, that they would focus on the next steps, they would focus on the criminal aspect of these proceedings. And those are very important. Those are things that the victims have to know for them to be able to participate. But I just want to read it back in and remind you that the advocates started this advocacy through a human rights lens and a human rights narrative. So I just want to remind you a few things the few human rights violations that the Duterte administration committed. Of course, we know that they violated the right to life by killing people. They violated due process and fair trial by planting evidence, by arbitrarily detaining people, wrongfully detaining them, denying them of counsel, particularly because of intimidation from police officers. Whenever victims would go to the police stations to get copies of their police report, for that report to form files that they could then submit to domestic courts, they will be intimidated and those documents will not be given to them, effectively denying them of their recourse to the courts. We also have heard of public attorney's office, and I have very much respect for people from our public attorney's office, but we have a lot of victims who would receive advice from the public attorney's office to just plead guilty so that their cases, their sentences could be reduced. We have also seen violations of liberty and security of person when they are being arrested wrongfully. We have seen how children's rights have been violated also in the cases wherein children became collateral damage, such as the 3-year-old Michael Pina. We have seen violations of the right to health, the drug problem, although arguably is also a public health problem and it's not being approached in that way. We are seeing issues relating to the right to effective remedy. Again, they could not go to courts. That's why they have to fly all the way here to the ICC because our courts are unwilling and are able to try these cases. And also freedom of expression and association. I think the journalists that are in this room with us today would know better than that of how it was so hard for them during those times. But in the context of the ICC, they are once again trying to impede the exercise of victims' rights through disinformation and harassment. And how does this happen? Through the disinformation, they are able to feed propaganda that the cases will not hold water. Through the disinformation, they are trying to convince the victims that Duterte will eventually be set free. And that's scary for them. They've put their hopes on this case only to be told that it will not prosper. We have received reports from local organizations where victims are already considering withdrawing from submitting more evidence to the case and submitting representations to the ICC because of this fear, thinking that their cases will lose in the long run. And this is something that lawyers could also be doing. But lawyers can only do so much as regards providing the correct information. We all need to stand together and fight all these trolls, no matter how many they are, in the thousands, in the millions, to make sure that the correct information would reach the victims and they would not be discouraged to participate in the proceedings. I would also like to take this moment to say that many of the rights that I mentioned, those violations, they have not been taken forward to the case before the ICC, which focuses on crimes against humanity of murder. But how about those who were raped during these illegal operations? I know when I documented a case wherein a woman was gang raped by three police officers in front of her husband in exchange for that husband's freedom. What do we tell her? That her case did not make it to the ICC. And this is something that also we need to be thinking about. The ICC is obviously important in, in securing accountability for justice, but there has to be complementary mechanisms that have to be done. That may be through domestic courts, or maybe the United Nations, or any other accountability bodies. But this time, what I feel has been missing in the conversations that have focused on procedure and criminal law are the conversations on human rights and the conversations on how victims are being left out. I would also not to disagree with the prosecutor. The prosecutor also needs to be strategic in which cases it would forward to make sure that it can make a strong case and secure a conviction. That is also what we want. But I'm saying that there is a need for these other cases not included in the charges to still also be addressed. They deserve redress, they deserve justice just as much as those victims of the killings do. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Leanne.
Good morning. Magandang hapon sa mga kababayan natin. We've heard from our esteemed panel of lawyers here this morning how the families of victims are preparing for the battle ahead. We very much welcome the fact that ICC will be trying this case. And this is a rare opportunity that victims are given due process or due recourse, especially from a justice-depraved country like the Philippines. Para sa amin, mahalaga ang bumubulong na kaso sa ICC at ubuskayan namin susuportahan ang prosesong ito. But at the same time, we continue to urge the Marcos Jr. administration to rejoin the ICC. If his intentions to cooperate with the ICC are truly genuine, if his intentions are truly meant to serve justice to the victims of Duterte's crimes, then Marcos Jr. should have no problem returning to the fold and reinstating the Philippine government's membership to the Rome Statute. Nevertheless, we reiterate that the ICC trial against Duterte is indeed a victory for the Filipino people. It is a step towards justice, but key to achieving complete justice still lies in the collective strength of the people. Sa hanay ng Filipino community dito sa Europa, inaasahan din natin ang tuloy-tuloy na iba't ibang mga forma ng pagkilos at aktibidad upang magpahayag ng suporta sa mga biktima ng EGK, ng mga human rights violations, at ng drug war ni Duterte. At gayon din ang pagpapalakas ng panawagan para siya ay pahimutin. As we speak, our kababayans are congregating in Brandenburger Tor in Berlin for a demonstration demanding Duterte be held accountable for his crimes against the Filipino people. Similar activities are set on March 26 and 27 in Brussels and Switzerland, respectively. And on March 28, this is Duterte's 80th birthday, various organizations, not just here in Europe, but across the globe, are preparing a birthday surprise for him. These are decentralized and coordinated mobilizations to take place in key cities all over the world. And this will be led by various Filipino organizations who will continue the call for justice and accountability. Here in Europe, numerous demonstrations and protests are planned in Paris, London, Brussels, and other major cities. And on the same day, we intend to launch here in the Netherlands a broad alliance of Filipino organizations, individuals, and solidarity allies across Europe, united under the call Duterte Panagutin, hold Duterte accountable, justice now. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the Dutch people for their solidarity in this fight. We willen onze diepste dankbaarheid betuigen aan het Nederlandse volk voor jullie niet aflatende solidariteit in de strijd voor gerechtigheid en verantwoording voor de talloze slachtoffers van Duterte's vrede regime. De weg die voor ons ligt blijft lang en uitdagend, maar met jullie voortdurende steun en solidariteit zijn we hoopvoller dan ooit dat het recht zal zegevieren. We hopen jullie te mogen verwelkomen bij onze verschillende demonstraties, forums en misschien zullen jullie zelfs deel uitmaken van de brede campagne-alliantie die we aan het opzetten zijn. Bedankt dat jullie achter ons staan. Samen zullen we niet rusten tot Duterte en zijn trawanten ter verantwoording zijn geroepen. From the Philippines to Europe and across the world, we will continue to expose Duterte's crimes and hold him responsible. We will remain steadfast in our commitment to justice and accountability. Thus, we reiterate our call. Hold Duterte accountable for all his crimes. Duterte, panagutin, justice now. Thank you.